Good morning, everybody. You look so civically engaged, a little bit drier than I think I saw pictures of yesterday. Happy Father's Day. Happy Pride. Heck, let's go hybrid. Happy Daddy's Day. Okay? You know who you are, baby. You know who you are. On these days, I'm really reminded of Reverend Muir's words, who shared with us on Mother's Day, that we are all nurturers. The people in this room, those in our virtual community. So whether you're nurturing children, each other, the overlooked, maybe the winged, the four-footed, or the earth, shout out to our Earth Justice small group, we see you and we are so grateful for you. My name is Em, my pronouns are they, them, and I am a preaching boot camper. Shout out to Kelly, Venida, Jonathan. Got me here today. I'm also finishing up my first year of seminary at Union Theological Seminary, so say a prayer for me. And this is the first time we've gotten to know each other in this context. So I'd love to start by actually going to dinner, an imaginary dinner. Okay, so will you go to an imaginary dinner with me? Okay, good. Okay, so you can get yourself comfortable, close your eyes. This is only going to be mildly traumatic. Okay, so 4 weeks, you, me, and our friend, let's call him Peter, have had this dinner reservation at our favorite restaurant in Antioch. Group dynamic download. Me and Peter, we have been close friends for years. We've lived in the same hometown. We've been on the same sports teams. We've even gone to the same pediatrician. You became my new friend when I moved to Brooklyn over a decade ago. We don't share a similar background prior to meeting, but in recent years, we have formed quite our own friend foundation. You, me, and Peter have become quite the trio. 2 days before the dinner, Peter calls me up in classic Peter mode and says, hey, I've made a scheduling mistake. Those guys, you know the ones, James's friends, well, they are actually going to be in town the night we had dinner, and I have to bring them. Thinking, okay, James's friends from the West Coast, exposed to far too many natural bodies of water, too much sunshine, but sure, fine. Not ideal, no longer our boys' night out, but fine. Night of the dinner. You and I get to the restaurant, talk to the host. Host tells us Peter and James's friends, they're already at the table. Social anxiety is peaking, but I've decided to override it with overfunctioning and enthusiasm. As I gear up for my boisterous greeting, my hands are outstretched. All of a sudden, they all exchange a glance, whisper something I can't quite make out, and they all get up to start to walk away. As they walk away, Peter in tow, I go toe-to-toe with Peter, and I say, hey, what's up? Where are you going? He looks me dead in the eyes and says, we can't sit with y'all. How do you even process that? Watching your oldest friend walk away because you or because they have chosen someone or something different. That's a core church memory for me. Growing up in the Bible Belt of Arkansas, I willingly did it all. Mission trips, camps, small groups, no drinking, not even cussing, no kissing boys, thank God. Just ultimate frisbee, my WWJD bracelet, and subtle yet devoted mid-raised hands in worship. So humble, so intimate, I couldn't dare to outstretch my elbows for fear of the Holy Spirit. By doing and saying the right things, I got a seat at the most exclusive tables in my church, and they were my best friends. The summer before my senior year of high school, I found myself even evangelizing unsuspecting Buddhist college students in Bangkok, Thailand, using the Roman road. If you don't know what that means, don't look it up, but the Roman road is like a casual and colorful way to use the scripture of Romans to tell people they are separated from God by sin, and the only way to get back in a good place is if you accept Jesus into your heart. So between the Roman road and riding an elephant, both of which I have repented for, just to be clear, I walked away from that trip with one extremely consequential knowing. My days with this community are numbered because I am totally gay. It's not like I kissed a girl or a they in Thailand. I truly do wish that didn't happen for far too long afterwards. But we just talked about so much separation, right? Between Christians and Buddhists, between believers and sinners, us and them, that I realized I'm a them. I'm a they them, actually. I am definitely getting kicked out of this fellowship. Regardless of the years, regardless of the bonds with the people, or my personal relationship with Jesus, this community wasn't going to sit with me anymore. Seats taken, they would say, by someone not in cargo shorts. Am I alone in this experience? I know we haven't all worn cargo shorts, most of us have, but have you ever been separated from someone or something too different to belong anymore? I hear those giving stories Sunday after Sunday. Thank you so much, Mark, this morning for yours. And I hear a spirit tending to our feelings of not belonging and our yearnings for belonging. Are we alone in this feeling? Our passage for today shows us, no, we are not alone. The same thing happened to a major figure of the New Testament named Paul. And believe it or not, it was at a dinner table. Paul's past and current spiritual companions, who were other Jesus followers, by the way, refused to sit at a table with Paul because of his new spiritual companions. And let me tell you, when they walked away, he was pissed. We're going to turn today to Galatians 2:11 through about 16 to hear Paul explain to us what happened in Antioch, a city in the ancient Greco-Roman world. But before we do, a little Paul 101. Okay. So if we consider that Jesus was born around 4 BCE, just go with it. I know it's kind of mind-blowing, right? And then was crucified, scholars think probably around 30 CE, Paul was not a Jesus follower when Jesus was alive. He was a Pharisee. And that is a sect within Judaism that follows strict adherence to Jewish laws, rituals, customs, and traditions. Paul speaks very openly about in his adulthood, he actually persecuted Jesus followers. And then, through a transformational experience, he became a Jesus follower. And that's going to be around 31 to 32 CE. He started a missionary movement telling people along this path that Jesus is the Messiah. His mission established communities of believers all along that map, and he wrote those communities of believers letters that we read today in the New Testament. For some, aka most, portions of writings commonly attributed to Paul are controversial. And in our cultural context, the writings have been used against women, people of color, the LGBTQIA community, and others. Thus our series, Dear Paul, what's up with you? And specifically for today, we're going to be thinking through what's up with all that us versus them. So Galatians is a letter Paul undisputably wrote to the community of believers in Galatia. Here's the incident of Antioch. 11. When Cephas, also known as Peter, came to Antioch, I, Paul, opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. What did he do, Paul? What did he do? For before certain men came from James, Peter used to eat with the Gentiles. But when the men from James arrived, Peter began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Okay. The other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of them all, "You are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs?" There you have it. Paul serving us the hot goss of first century Jesus followers. Naming some major names, y'all, and clearly stating a divide in the Jesus movement of this time. If you can just imagine that. On one side, we have Paul's number one frenemy, Peter, disciple of Jesus. Also, James, Jesus' brother, by the way, I think. I don't know. There are a couple James in there. Disciple of Jesus. Men from James, also called the circumcised group, Jesus followers. On the other, we have Paul, apostle of Jesus. We have the Gentiles. We have Barnabas, apostle of Jesus. And then we have other Jews. And then Paul tells us that Barnabas, putting the B in betrayal, his missionary partner, switches sides and even brings other Jews with him. Paul's retelling paints these folks, all believers in Jesus, as divided over their relationship to Gentiles and subsequently their relationship to each other. Together, we're going to ask more questions about this section of text, zooming in on the underlying culture and context of first century Jews, Gentiles, and Jesus followers to focus on how our players up on the screen are relating to one another. Through that lens, we're going to take a deep breath and deeply wonder, what is up with Paul? What's up with all this us-them talk? And how can this ancient conflict inform our community today? First question, what is the deal with sharing a table with Gentiles? Okay, so the word Gentile in our passage, it comes from the Greek word ethnos, meaning nation. When you hear the word ethnos, maybe you're hearing our English word for ethnicity, and that's absolutely right. In our text, Gentile is a word used to describe a group of people with distinct traditions, customs, and practices. Ethnicity is that invisible boundary, right? We draw around people to notate sameness, but also in that process, we absolutely highlight differences between this people group and this other people group. In the Hebrew Bible, also called the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, the word Gentile is not only used to paint a picture of ethnicity, it's also used to differentiate those who are Jewish from those who are not Jewish. So you've got us, the Jewish people, and then you've got them, the Gentiles. I'm like, what do we really mean by Jews or a Jewish person? So in our ancient culture and context, where there are many gods and many philosophies, the Jews are a distinct group of people. First of all, they worship that God. It's in that acronym right there. Jewish tradition tells us that that word is so sacred, so supreme, that we don't even say it out loud. We call it the divine name. We also can't even write it, so that's oftentimes why you see G/D. But ultimately, this is capital L, number one daddy in the sky, heaven daddy, the Lord. Woo, heaven daddy. All right. These are people in an agreement with this God, right? They're also descendants of this group. So just by being born into this lineage, you also are becoming Jewish. They follow the law. And so those are going to be some different commandments that God gives the people so that they can maintain this covenant. They also are going to interpret those different commandments and through decades form rituals, customs, and traditions of the faith. The three that are significant to our context in Galatians are circumcision, food laws, purity laws, tithing, setting aside certain foods, and restrictions, so not eating certain foods, and observing the Sabbath. We're not really going to talk about that, but just to mention it. Okay, the Jews, right? On the other hand, we've got the Gentiles. So what's important about this is they are not worshiping that God. They are not in a covenant with that God. Therefore, they are not following the law to maintain that covenant. Therefore, they are not practicing rituals, customs, and traditions of the faith, not circumcised, no food laws, no Sabbath. Another thing, in ancient Jewish circles, the word Gentile also culturally came to mean someone not observing the law, aka lawless. The word sinner also arises in the text. Not super clear the exact definition, but I had a mentor this week describe this to me as meaning someone sufficiently outside the bounds of the law. This will be important for later, but in specific instances in the New Testament, Gentile is used interchangeably or parallel to the word sinner. Sinner meaning lawless, sufficiently outside of the bounds of the law. A little unclear, okay, simple enough. Stage is set. We got your Jews, we got your Gentiles, schema engaged. Everyone loves a rivalry, right? No, not that simple. Okay, for two reasons. First of all, people are just too dynamic to fit into these blanket statements, these general statements like the Jews. Like, blanket statements are like kind of ick, okay? Let me demonstrate. A blanket statement would be like calling both of these things felines, right? Yeah, okay, sure, genetically, science people back me up, but like kind of wades into erasure, doesn't really capture the nuance, don't really get to marvel in the uniqueness, both have genetic God-given prowess, but when it comes to the application of said prowess, very different, right? The point here is that there is diversity and variety within the Jewish community. You see a blanket statement like Jews in a text, you should be asking yourself, what does that really mean? Should we really just be lumping everybody together, or maybe there are some more questions to ask? When it comes to practices, rituals, customs, and traditions, there is diversity and variety in interpretation and application. Mostly everyone follows certain traditions like circumcision, it's a big deal. But when it comes to food purity laws, there is diverse application of those laws. Different groups are adhering to different degrees of observation. Second reason why this is more complicated is you got those Jesus followers. This might be obvious to you, but for some reason it kind of skipped over my head. But the first Jesus followers were Jewish. I think that like rampant anti-Semitism that like paints Jews as inferior to Christians really got me, because that really wasn't clear. And I don't really know why, because Jesus was a Jewish rabbi. I'm gonna need your help here. He was king of the... Okay, well now you tell me. Peter, disciple of Jesus, was Jewish. Paul, an apostle of Jesus, was? Yeah, he was a Pharisee. James, brother of Jesus, was? Yeah, we're talking ethnically and spiritually Jewish. In the ancient world, there was tremendous, if not entire, overlap for the first followers of Jesus in Jewish practices, traditions, and customs. So you get all the things that we said before, but with one significant difference, which was Jewish Jesus followers were people who believed Jesus was the Messiah, the anointed one. Believing in Jesus did not mean abandoning the law, past rituals, and customs. We can infer with degree and variety the first century Jewish Jesus followers are maintaining parts of the law, rituals, and customs. Circumcision can't really be reversed. I've heard that. Food laws, definitely following them, and the Sabbath. The question really is, do Gentiles, to be considered believers, to be in relationship with other Jewish believers, need to adopt Jewish customs? What does Paul believe? In verse 15, he says, "We who are Jews by birth and not sinful Gentiles," all right, know that a person, it's like, come on, I was with you, and then you said that. that a person is not justified by the works of the law, but faith in Jesus Christ. Paul argues that Gentile Jesus followers do not need to observe circumcision, they do not need to observe food laws or the Sabbath. They are justified or made righteous by just believing that Jesus is the Messiah. What beliefs are the men from James and Peter demonstrating through their actions? In walking away from the table, they demonstrate that Gentiles and Gentile Jesus followers do need to observe certain rituals, traditions, and customs to share a table with them, to engage in table fellowship with them. British New Testament scholar James Dunn, who takes a new perspective on Paul, says this: Paul's charge against Peter is most likely that by his actions, he had raised the ritual barriers surrounding their table fellowship, thereby excluding the Gentile believers unless they Judaize, unless they do what they do. And Jewish table fellowship has significant ethnic and religious significance for Jews and Jesus followers. Like, imagine this table. The Jewish leader takes a loaf of bread, he recites the Torah, the law, a blessing. He then breaks that bread and passes it to other people at the table who are also Jews or Jewish Jesus followers, in this case, Jews. They take that bread, and it's a breaking and a passing and a symbolization, a communal extension and partaking of the blessing given by God to the people of God, a commemoration of the covenant at the table of God. Pretty big deal. But that also creates a boundary. So what's up with Paul? Why, as a Jew or a Jewish Jesus follower, is he inviting Gentiles to the table for fellowship? Well, he had an awakening. Prophet, lesbian, warrior, poet, Audre Lorde, Lorde with an E, helps us viscerally understand the meaning of the word awakening with a childhood memory recounted in her book, Zammy. Lorde spent her childhood seeing the blur of her surroundings, a person considered legally blind because of her extreme nearsightedness, and she didn't have effective glasses. So she shares this: before my glasses, I had known trees as tall brown pillars, ending in fat, puffy swirls of paling greens, much like the pictures of them I perused in my sister's storybooks, from which I learned so much of my visual world, because it was closer. And then she gets glasses. She says this: enthralled, I stared up at the sudden revelation of each single and particular leaf of green, precisely shaped and laced about with unmixed light. Lorde shows us that an awakening is a realization of difference, to pursue the edges of a blurred out world. What difference was Paul awakened to? It tells us Galatians 1:15 through 16. But when God, who had set me apart before I was born and called me through his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son to me, so that I might proclaim him among the Gentiles? What? Jesus told you to go tell the Gentiles, the lawless, the sinners, that they can be at the table of God? Yes. Paul is awakened to an uncommon mission and a radical vision of kinship. God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit tells Paul, go right up to that edge, Paul. You cross that fellowship boundary into uncommon territory. Go tell them, the Gentiles, who didn't think that they could be part of this movement, didn't think that they could have a relationship with God, didn't think that they could be a Jesus follower, that they can. For Jewish Jesus followers, the ones who were his disciples, they ate with him, they walked with him, they regrettably betrayed him. You can imagine how audacious this proclamation would be. It's like, do you even go here? No. Last time I checked, no. And honestly, how? How is this even possible? Those not in the lineage? They didn't receive the covenant. They don't put in the work to maintain it, to be welcomed at the table of God for sacred fellowship. How? Jesus. Jesus gives us a new vision of kinship, and it is radical. Here's his vision of table fellowship. I think it's going to sound familiar. While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it. He gave it to them and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." Jesus makes clear that his sacrifice will extend the covenant for all and to all, both Jews and Gentiles. Jesus' picture of fellowship is absolutely unbounded. And his ministry shows him practicing what he preached. This is what he did. In Luke 7:36, he is eating with Pharisees, meaning he's absolutely engaging in their customs and rituals. But he does something a little subversive, which is he brings a woman from the city, which scholars believe is a euphemism for a sex worker, and that sex worker starts to wash his feet with her tears and then dries it with her hair. Foot washing is part of a ritual purity law. Wow. He also ate with tax collectors and sinners repeatedly. So then why does Paul get such side-eye? Why did they abandon him? Well, he was on an uncommon mission for a radical vision of uncommon kinship. And let's be clear, he was in process, just like you and me. He calls Peter a hypocrite. He brings up the fact that Peter did used to eat with Gentiles, and then these guys came along, and then he changed his mind. He also uses absolutes. He says, because by the works of the law, no one will be justified. It's like rhetoric is dangerous. He's just trying to convey his passion for his ministry to Gentiles and his understanding that faith alone in Christ justifies or makes a Gentile righteous. Maybe I'm giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt, but this text is filled with messy moments from a person trying to relate and make sense of something he believes deeply and feels called to, but it's not practically working out the way he wants or imagined. And Peter is also in process, as are other Jesus Jewish followers. Peter's mission is different than Paul's. His mission is to go preach the gospel of Jesus, the good news of Jesus, to the circumcised, to the Jewish people. His actions read a little bit different today, but in the context of the Roman Empire, where Jewish communities were constantly being threatened through intimidation, torture, and murder because of their spiritual and ethnic difference, there were legitimate reasons for trying to preserve Jewish spiritual and ethnic traditions. Survival is a legitimate reason to insulate within fellowship. Did Peter and Paul ultimately see their differences and stick it out for each other? Did they reconcile? I don't know. I hope so. The tragedy of it all is that in their division, they shared the same end. Both, like Jesus, were executed, murdered by the Roman Empire for being a follower of Jesus. Paul was beheaded. Empire never stops dividing. Lord, give us awakening. In a world where white supremacy sees us as a blur, how is the Spirit calling you to see those out of bounds, those our society isolates and discards as too unhoused, too unclean, too soft, too addicted, too broke, from too far away, too far gone, too gay? How is the Spirit calling you to pull them in and say, nope, you sit with me. You sit with us. The blessing of Jesus' boundless love is available to all and for all. No ifs, no buts, no ands. All right, Forefront. So what does our ideal table look like? Who are we with? Where do we eat? Think about who's around you in this spiritual community. If you feel comfortable, look to see who's around you, who gets a seat. Does our forefront table look like Jesus' table? Is there social, class, or political division? Ageism, maybe even hierarchy? Has capitalism wooed us into the comfort of assimilation and insulation? Who gets an invitation to the table? And in asking myself this same question, my answer was this. My table is on gentrified Franklin Avenue in Crown Heights, with people I know most deeply, people who are more like me than not. At its worst, this is middle-aged white people. At its a little bit better, it's queer believers who are housed, who have access to mental health services, and are mostly employed. Because for the record, I am sometimes employed. And now reflecting on Paul and Peter's relationships, both on the same team, on different missions, yet divided. Within this community, do we have, or where do we have, moments of division? And in saying that, I am not ever suggesting you cross lines of physical, emotional, or psychological safety. And not everyone is for everybody. But as a whole, do we walk towards each other more than away from each other? What radical vision of uncommon kinship is waiting for us? If the Spirit had not expounded Forefront's founder Jonathan Williams' spiritual horizons and walked towards the LGBTQI community, and uncommon kinship wasn't a core value of this spiritual community, I would not have found my church home nearly 2 years ago. How do we keep seeking the Spirit as she continues to rewrite our understanding of uncommon kinship for the next month, decade, and 500 years of Christianity? Spirit, do a work in us. May we have a crowded table. Okay.